This new album of yours, and that's a song from it. It's a tribute to New Orleans, of course, which is where you're from. You were born there and lived there. And it's a very poignant thing for you because you went down there after Hurricane Katrina, didn't you? Quite soon after.
I did. I was in New York, and I knew the hurricane was coming. It was supposed to hit on a Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember. And I tried to call my dad and my family. You know, all the phone lines were down. And then the hurricane actually bypassed New Orleans, and I thought everything was going to be fine, you know, except for some slight damage because of the brunt of the hurricane didn't hit New Orleans. But the next day, I heard on TV that 80% of the city was underwater, and I was very concerned about, you know, my family's welfare, my friends. So I ended up going down there the day after, and man, it was like a war zone. I've never seen anything like that.
Tell us what it was like. What do you remember of it?
Well, NBC in the States agreed to, I couldn't get down there. I couldn't get a flight down there. And living in New York, it's, you know, 1,500 miles by car. So I called my friend who was the president of NBC, and I said, can I get on your plane and ride down there? And so they landed in Baton Rouge, which is the state capital of Louisiana. And I drove into New Orleans, and as I came over the Mississippi River Bridge, the whole city was a blackout. They told me that I could go down there if I would do some correspondence work for them. They wanted to show the world what was going on, and they asked me if I would kind of tour them around the city. And to be quite frank, any way I could have gotten down there, I said I would do it. Sure. So I remember spending the night in my car and waking up, you know, 6 or 7 in the morning and just seeing the city, which is, I was underwater. I went to my dad's house by boat and looked around. A guy was on the corner, and he had a pair of shorts on, and he recognized me, and he says, have you been down to the convention center? Now, the convention center was maybe 6 blocks away from where I was sleeping in my car, outside of the convoy of news groups that were down there covering the storm. I said, no, I haven't seen it. He said, you need to come with me. So he brought me down to the convention center, and I got there, and there were somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people waiting there. Now, this was day 3 or day 4. They had no food, no water. First people he brought me to were 2 dead people laying on the sidewalk outside of the building. Then he brought me inside, and I'm fairly well known in New Orleans, and people would come up to me. They were white, black, young, old, and they'd say, when are they coming for us? Because they told us to come here. We don't have the means to leave the city for whatever reason. They didn't have a car or didn't know anyone. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had to have some kind of answer. I said, they haven't told me anything. There were no police there. There were infants that were dying. There were people having seizures. People didn't have their heart medication, and it was tragic. So I had a satellite phone that NBC was letting me use, and I stood on top of a chair, and I asked for as many people's attention as I could get. And I said, you know, I'm not a public official, but I'm going to let people know that you're here. So I called MSNBC, and I said, are you aware of the fact that there's many, many thousands of people here that were told to come here, but have been just left here? And eventually they got out. But let me tell you, it was profound, because you expect to see total devastation. Like in the other states, like Mississippi, everything was blown away. But in New Orleans, like the house I grew up in, the house was still standing, but when you know, there was water in it for 6 weeks.
What about your dad? Where was he?
He had gone to Mississippi to get away from it. The storm actually ended up going right over where he was. But he turned out to be okay. But, you know, repairing his house, it's so sad to see this great city in such demise, because everybody left. If you want to fix your house, there's nobody around to fix it. And these people had hurricane insurance, but they didn't have flood insurance. So the houses are still intact, but they're ruined because of the flood water. So now you got, you know, more than half the population not living there anymore. And
so this record that you've done is for that relief fund?
It's a record I wanted to do anyway, but after Katrina, I said, you know, I need to go in and record some of these songs. And the proceeds from one of the songs, which was written, it's an uplifting record, I think. I don't want to get too despondent on the whole CD, but there's one song that relates specifically to what I saw down there, and the proceeds from that are going to raise money for a project that we have called Musicians Village, which is up and running, 80% of the inhabitants are musicians, and we're building a big art center, and so it's
so that New Orleans that you grew up in is gone, basically. I mean, it's been
the touristy
away.
parts, like if you went to the French Quarter,
which is where you went as a young musician.
That's all still there.
That's still there.
Yeah, because New Orleans is shaped like a saucer, and the French Quarter is on one of the higher edges of the saucer. The levees broke on the other side of the city and just poured water into that saucer. So all of the mid-line, you know, the bottom is actually 20 feet below sea level.
Yeah.
There's some parts where you can look up and you see riverboats passing above your head because the levees are holding the water back. So New Orleans is really like a big bowl. So a lot of the residential areas are gone forever.
I mean, you started playing, what, you were 3 when you first planted.
Tinkling around on it, you know, nothing real serious.
You walked with a piano and started playing a tune?
We had a piano in the house, and you know, I was in New Orleans. There was music everywhere. My parents, who had owned a record store about 10 years before I was born, would play music around the house. And so I would fiddle around with it, and I just loved it.
But you found you could play almost immediately?
I could play something. Like, I was fascinated with the fact that you could hit one of these keys and a note would come out, and you hit 2 or 3 of them and different sounds would come out. I was just fascinated by
that. But you made your first record when you were 6?
When I was 9 years old.
Oh, 9, sorry.
Yeah, and it was great. I had 2 great parents, and they knew how much I loved it. And I'd go down to the French Quarter every weekend, and I would play with these musicians.
Well, tell me what it was like in those days down there. I mean,
oh, man, it was great. I mean, there was so much music down there. It's getting back to that point now, I might add, slowly but surely. But my parents would bring me down, and I remember the first call I got was to be on a real gig. I was 14 years old. I had been sitting in, you know, playing like a song here, a song there. But now I had an opportunity to be the piano player. It was during the summertime. It was from 11 at night till 3 in the morning. And my mother had died at this point. My dad was kind of assuming the role of both parents. And I said, Dad, can I go play this gig? He said, yeah, you can go do it. I'll drop you off and I'll pick you up at 3 in the morning. So I got down there, and I was playing. And over the course of the week, the drummer, a very famous New Orleans jazz drummer named Duke Barker, was playing. And he's sitting as close to me as you are. And he had a real strong backbeat, you know. And night after night, I started to get an earache. So I took a piece of Kleenex or cotton, and I put it in my ear, and he kept playing. I kept pushing it in. He kept playing. He kept pushing it. Before you know it, I had this riveting pain going down the whole right side of my body because I pushed it in too far. I couldn't get it out. I think it was pressing on some kind of nerve. So I called my dad. I said, Papa, you got to come down here and bail me out, man. He said, what's wrong? I said, I got this piece of cotton stuffed in my ear. So he comes down there, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's got me in the corner with tweezers. You know, I'm trying to be cool around these jazz musicians, you know, and he's yanking this thing out of my ear. It was a great childhood, man. It was fun.